To all my marketers out there, you're probably spread real thin right now. I'm sure you need some help between creating content, launching campaigns, generating leads, scoring leads, nurturing leads, and a lot more stuff with leads. You barely have a moment to breathe, let alone do your best marketing. But that's where HubSpot and Breeze, its new built-in AI, come in. When you combine the power of Marketing Hub and Content Hub, you can have your best quarter, every single time. With tools that instantly remix your content, lead scoring to shine a light on potential customers, and AI-curated analytics suite for reports and KPIs. And that's all alongside co-pilots and agents to automate all of your tasks, making your life easier, getting you the results faster, and better connecting you to all your data all in one place. Doesn't that sound nice? So stop spreading yourself so thin and start making major moves with HubSpot. You can visit HubSpot.com/marketers to learn more. All right, good morning, everybody. It's Tuesday, January 14th. I'm Jon Weigelland here with Rob Litterst, and this is the Hustle Daily Show. Alcohol companies are already having a bad year here in the U.S. State governments like New Mexico are proposing higher taxation on alcohol, and public health officials are proposing warning labels and marketing restrictions, which aim to take the $260 billion alcohol industry down a few pegs. So why is all this happening right now, and what does the future hold for your next bourbon neat? We'll get into all that before we get going. Let's give you the news in business and tech. To start off, yesterday morning, the White House published a bunch of new guidelines on AI chips and restrictions around what countries and companies American AI firms can sell to. As a result, you can imagine companies like NVIDIA, Palantir, Apple, Meta, and many more tech companies are facing a stock market downturn this week. From there, we go to Sonos. The CEO of Sonos, Patrick Spence, is leaving the company following an absolutely bungled, disastrous Sonos app update in 2024. The buggy and feature-destroying update caused revenue to fall 16% in Q4 of 2024 alone. And now Tom Conrad, the founder of Pandora, is sitting as interim CEO over at Sonos. Rob, I know you're a Sonos user. What do you got to say about this?
Love Sonos so much. Could not agree more that the app needs work. It is a really negative app experience. Like, I run into so many bugs every single time I use it. And the challenge for Sonos is that there are other apps that people can use to play their devices on Sonos. Like, I could very easily just go on my Spotify app and choose my Sonos speaker as where it plays through, which is what I will do sometimes. But it's very frustrating because it's one of the first things we do every morning. My family, like, we turn on music on the Sonos. Mm-hmm. And I'm always kind of going back and forth on like, which app do I want to use? Because the UI and kind of like the user experience on Spotify is so much better. I can find my music more easily. I can find playlists more easily. On Sonos, there will be times where I just like straight up can't even find things from my Spotify library. And it just makes no sense. I'm not really sure what's going on there, but I'm really hopeful that this new CEO can kind of help prioritize that experience, because I do think it's such an important lever for them. Like, their hardware is so good. Mm-hmm. If their software was like even okay, I think they'd be in really good shape.
Yeah. I mean, they really market themselves about being high quality and also having kind of seamless integration between all of their speakers and sets that you can buy. So yeah, the fact that they haven't been able to really use the speakers, people have been experiencing problems with like delays, glitches. Like when you press play, it takes like maybe a minute to actually play the music, and maybe it's not the song you even played. So yeah, I get where people are coming from here. And in my personal experience using the Sonos app, you kind of like use other apps within the Sonos app. So It connects to like Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, and it's a real clunky experience. So I hope they get it figured out soon so people can use these speakers. Because the speakers, as you mentioned, are pretty sick. They're really good.
Completely agree.
Up next, over to Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin called off the launch of its new Glenn rocket from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station early Monday morning. It disclosed during its live stream that engineers were dealing with, quote, anomalies, which means problems with a rocket, I would assume. And meanwhile, SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket and Starship will both be taking flight from NASA's Kennedy Space Center this week. So Blue Origin falling behind a little bit in the space race. From there, we go to JP Morgan. JP Morgan Chase recently announced that its 300,000 around employees have to return to work 5 days a week starting in March. Big ouch. Staff, of course, is not happy with this, with some of them now looking at unionizing as an option to combat the policy, as reported here by Barron's.
And finally, into airlines, budget airline Ryanair, one of my longtime favorites, wants to kill your buzz in the airport. Ryanair Holdings plc is asking European authorities to implement a 2-drink maximum in airports in hopes of limiting onboard disruptions from unruly passengers. The airline, which cited an incident that cost over $15,000 in April 2024, suggested enforcing the limit with boarding pass stamps in the airport, and it limits the sale of alcohol on flights when needed, especially when flying to popular destinations like Ibiza. So, Rob, what do you make of this kind of maximum set on drinks in the airport? You can't imagine alcohol companies are too happy about that.
Oh, totally. I think it's smart, honestly. I feel like airports are almost like a completely different planet. You'll go to a morning flight and you'll see people drinking like a glass of Chardonnay at like 5:30 a.m.
Yeah.
It's like, wait, what?
Time doesn't matter.
Exactly. Time doesn't matter. Like the rules of civil society don't matter.
Right.
But I do think that this is really smart because like you don't want crazy things happening up in the air.
Sure.
I do think alcohol companies are going to be bummed. And candidly, I mean, I think the airlines make money when they sell drinks too. So, you know, it's kind of like they're shooting themselves in the foot there, but I think it's smart in the long run.
Yeah. Alcohol is a really divisive topic as of late, as you know, just shown there. Sales are super down, regulators are perked up, and big alcohol looks like it's taking some hits in the United States and even abroad. So, Rob, let's start with some proposed alcohol taxes. So, what's really the story about where these taxes are coming in and who's trying to get these approved?
So one of the big states where this is trying to get approved, and this isn't the first time that states have tried to get alcohol taxes approved, is New Mexico, where alcohol-related mortality rates are the highest in the United States. So obviously, very good reason there, just looking at the data. They want to kind of rein this in and try to figure it out. They're really looking at kind of two different tax strategies, two different proposals on kind of how they would implement it. One is just kind of like a straight flat 3% tax rate on alcohol. The other is a 20-cent public health investment fee per drink and will adjust for inflation. This is the second year in a row that New Mexico lawmakers have tried to pass this tax. Other states like Oregon and Nebraska have tried something similar. But as you can imagine, there are alcohol industry groups and lobbyists that have poured hundreds of thousands of dollars into battling and lobbying against these new taxes.
Yeah.
So none of them have been passed in the last few years.
Yeah, I would assume that big alcohol, as we call it, has had quite a bit to do with that. But what's kind of the history of alcohol taxes in the U.S.? Because, you know, considering that public health officials have thought alcohol was a problem for a very long time. So
totally.
How have they combated it before in this way?
Yeah, so most alcohol taxes are flat rate. So to kind of two options that we talked about earlier, most veer towards that kind of like 3% tax rate. I'm not saying that the number is 3%, but that just kind of like flat rate is the more popular methodology of actually implementing this and haven't been adjusted for inflation in decades. So in Massachusetts, officials last raised the rate during the Carter administration, right?
Okay.
So rest in peace, Jimmy Carter. That was the 70s. Alcohol taxes have lost 74% of their value since 1980. And a great kind of case in point there is grocery items were up on average 25% since the beginning of the pandemic. In that same time frame, liquor was up only 14%.
Wow.
So obviously prices not going up anywhere near as much as other items.
Yeah, it seems like inflation was kind of left out of the equation here on purpose, maybe.
Yeah.
So that a lot of these companies have been able to thrive in the past few years, but now it seems like they're kind of hitting a roadblock, at least in the past year or two. There's been a lot of public health concerns that have come out, even more so with a lot of these companies trying to get or lobby for these alcohol companies to slap bigger warning labels or, you know, try to decrease consumption any way they can of alcoholic beverages.
100%. I mean, I think there's been a massive wellness push just in general over like the last decade. The kind of like literature and content around wellness has just absolutely exploded.
Yeah.
You'll find wellness thought leaders that argue about everything. But one of the things that's most consistent is that alcohol is not great for you. And you know, I used to wear a Whoop device to track my sleep. And the biggest thing that I learned from it is that, you know, when I drink, I don't sleep as well. And like, I could have told you that myself, you know what I mean? So I think like everybody kind of knows that alcohol isn't great for you.
Right.
What's interesting is there's a lot more literature now that's basically saying like no level of alcohol is safe, which, you know, I think that there's obviously data that supports that, but I think alcohol also does things that are harder to measure. And if you look at like the blue zones, like I have this cookbook, the Blue Zones cookbook about all the areas areas in the country that have the highest concentration of centenarians. And most of those regions do drink alcohol. Most of them are just drinking in moderation. And it's typically like a glass or two, usually very small glasses of red wine at dinners. I think that the complete abstinence approach, it has its merits for sure. I talk to my doctor about this when I go in for, annual physicals and all that stuff. And he gives me this range of like how much is healthy for drinking. And typically he says, 2 drinks a night or like 14 per week or whatever. And I pushed back on him at one point about that. And he was like, well, if you want to be like the most healthy, like the only safe amount of alcohol to drink is none.
Right.
The only kind of safe approach is not drinking anything. And it seems like a lot more people are taking that to heart, and it's starting to resonate a lot more with kind of a broader section of the population.
Yeah, totally. I mean, just talk about the popularity of Dry January.
Yeah.
I know you said before we started that you're doing it this year. And
totally.
I mean, this is probably a great time to talk about this story too, because alcohol companies aren't doing too hot this month, definitely. And even towards younger generations like Gen Z, as reported in this court story, is drinking 20% less than millennials did at their age. And 23% of them say that they're turning to non-alcoholic beer, wine, spirits of all kinds, which has been another industry that's kind of seen an explosion in the past few years. So the declining sales, they make sense when you take it in this cultural lens of people just aren't drinking that much anymore. The public knows a bit more about the health concerns. And I guess where the alcohol industry goes from here is anybody's guess. Is they got to fight to stay alive, and they probably will, of course.
Totally. And I mean, yeah, I'm doing Dry January right now. Been drinking non-alcoholic beer here and there, mainly non-alcoholic Guinness, which somehow, I don't know how they do it. But
how is it? Is it good?
It tastes exactly the same as a real Guinness. It's unbelievable. I legitimately have no idea how they do this. Yeah, it's...
Gotta say.
Dude, like, it is mind-blowing. It's so good. Like, I'm a millennial, and I think back to like high school and college and like all the hoopla around drinking. And that was really kind of like the main way that kids kind of like broke free and like did their own thing and made a lot of terrible decisions. I feel like more modern and more recent generations have really kind of turned on that. It's really wild to see Gen Z and how little they care about drinking. Yeah. And I kind of hope those trends continue. As somebody with kids, I would love to see drinking go away or at least go down considerably. But yeah, it's wild. I mean, you think about it, man, like, Prohibition, that was like the 1910s, 1920s.
Yeah, like almost 100 years ago.
It's not that long ago, though. Yeah. Like, my grandparents were alive during Prohibition. Like, that's like really wild. It's not that long ago. And you see these kind of like ebbs and flows of like popular opinion on things like this. And it's really interesting to track it and just see what happens.
Yeah.
The way that I always think about this stuff is it's just like everything in moderation. And like, I think alcohol kind of falls into that too. And I totally get the merits of drinking nothing and being completely sober. I don't see the merits of like over drinking, like drinking way too much. I think that's like obviously not a good idea.
I don't think there are actually merits.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know.
But I think meeting somewhere in the middle, having a couple glasses of wine during dinner, pair some good wine with some good food and have a nice night.
I mean, I kind of see it like eating a Reese's cup. Like, it's not good for you, but it tastes good. You have it once in a while, you enjoy yourself.
Exactly.
There's that balance that I feel like people need to reach. But now maybe everybody knows a little bit more about the adverse effects long term. So more in moderation, which is bad for the alcohol industry, but, maybe good for us.
100%.
All right, and that'll do it for us today. Thanks for tuning into the Hustle Daily Show. We're a proud part of the HubSpot Podcast Network. Our editor is Robert Hartwig, and our executive producer is Darren Clark. We've got a ton more tech and business coverage in our newsletter. Go sign up at thehustle.co/email and follow us on Instagram at The Hustle Daily. See you tomorrow.
Hey, everybody. I've been listening to this awesome podcast lately. It's called Nudge, hosted by Phil Agnew. It's brought to you by the HubSpot Podcast Network, the audio destination for business professionals. So have you ever noticed how the smallest changes can have the biggest impact? On Nudge, you learn simple, evidence-based tips to help you kick bad habits, get that raise, and grow a business. Every bite-sized 20-minute show comes packed with practical advice from admired entrepreneurs and behavioral scientists alike. And Nudge is fast-paced, but still insightful with real-world examples that you can actually apply. Oh, and by the way, it's the UK's fastest-growing business podcast. I was listening to an episode recently that Phil, the host, had on Harvard professor Mike Norton, and Mike convinced Phil that he had to handwrite every single one of his emails before sending them to understand what he was really trying to talk about. This process, although it sounds insane, he claims, Phil, that it made his emails 3.5 times better. You got to listen to this podcast. It's a great way to understand how email marketing can help your business. You can listen to Nudge wherever you get your podcasts.
New year, new resolutions. And this year on the Best Idea Yet podcast, we're revealing the untold origin stories of the products you're obsessed with. And we promise you have never heard these before.
Ever wonder how the iconic Reese's Peanut Butter Cup was invented? Because it was by accident. H.B. Reese, a former frog salesman,
True story,
stumbled upon the idea after accidentally burning a batch of peanuts.
Classic.
Proving that sometimes our best ideas arise from what seem like our biggest mistakes.
And Jack, did you know there's a scientific explanation why humans crave that surprising combo of peanut butter and chocolate?
I didn't, but it sounds delicious.
It is delicious.
So, if you're looking to get inspired and creative this year, tune in to the Best Idea Yet. You can find us on the Wondery app or wherever you get your podcasts.
And if you're looking for more podcasts to help you start this year off right, check out New Year, New Mindset on the Wondery app. Who knows? Your next great idea could be an accident that you burned. This is Nick.
And this is Jack.
And we'll see you on the Best Idea Yet.